How is it going, guys? It's Eclipse here and welcome to today's video where we check out the NM116, of course the new season pass tank for everyone to be able to get so long as you reach level 100. Obviously it is the free version, so even if you don't purchase any of the season passes, whether you go for the ultimate one with the creature tank that we've done a review on recently if you want to check out, along with the Object 752 if you do purchase the season pass standard one. Basically this tank is available for anyone that gets to season rank 100. Obviously it's going to be quite hard for you to get there currently because we only have 1 week's worth of challenges. Obviously if you're watching this down the line to check out whether the NM116 is actually worth grinding to season rank 100, well, let me just tell you, it is entirely worth it. This is actually a tank that has made me want to play the Cold War game mode, which can't be said for very many tanks within that mode. It really does offer that nostalgic feeling of playing the M41 Chaffee. So if you've ever played World War II game mode with the Tier 5 American light tank, this really does bring it right back, except this tank, however, has a much higher alpha damage gun with 280 alpha damage worth of hit points, meaning that yes, you can pen a lot of things within the World War II game mode. You also can deal quite a significant amount of damage, and when you compare it to something like an M46 pattern, you've got the alpha damage advantage over that tank. Yes, you may have a slight disadvantage over things like the T44A, and as you go through the tech tree, yeah, you may be at a slight disadvantage, but you still overall will be able to deal a hell of a lot more damage in a shorter period of time. The DPM on this thing is fantastic, reloads really quickly, especially if you have the advanced loader as your equipment slot, and the accuracy is really nice at 0.29, 1.8 second aim time. Of course, we have got a commander in our slot. Obviously, you can see the perks as follows. Yes, you could have some extra accuracy ones to boost it up. Yes, we've gone with a camo build, and boy oh boy is the camo fantastic on the NM116. 181 meter still concealment with 550 meters vision range. Only actual change to the vision statistics is of course using advanced concealment. Now, there are a few options for the perks that you want to be taking on the NM116, and that is, of course, the gun stabilizer. That's kind of almost one of the things that you have to have when you have the option to take as an equipment slot. Then, of course, we have advanced loader just to reduce that loading time and increase our DPM, which is what makes a tank so fantastic. You can rack up so much damage so quickly with this tank. Then, of course, we have the advanced concealment, which allows us to reduce the detectability of our tank so we can stay hidden for longer. Obviously, it doesn't matter so much in Cold War with regards to staying hidden, but it really does help for getting assistance damage and just trying to avoid being detected, especially if you put yourself in a position that avoids kind of easily being able to be seen. So if you're in a bush or something like that, it really does help. Some other perks you could choose over your kind of advanced concealment or advanced optics is of course to improve ventilation to just get that crude performance. It could be used. You could also, because of the very bad hull rotation speed, want to take traction system to increase max speed by 10% and of course increase the rotation speed of the hull by 10%, making it probably a lot easier to actually turn around, because that is the one weakness of the NM116. It doesn't turn like a light tank, although it does have a 61 kilometers an hour top speed, making this thing fairly mobile, especially compared to things like the M46 pattern, which are fairly slow in comparison. You know, you've got an extra 13 kilometers an hour top speed over them, and if you look at things like the T44A, you've got a significant advantage over them as well. So yes, you can hit very hard for the tier anyway. Yes, you can come up against Object 268s, which will smack you for 800, but often you won't be able to actually get hit that often because you have the speed, you've also got the mobility, the camo, and so yes, you can still have fantastic games, and that is why I like the NM116. It really does bring back that traditional light tank feel. Even though it is a tank destroyer, technically it is very much like a light tank. If you've ever played the Hellcat, this is basically the same sort of tank. You're very kind of stealthy. You also have that fairly high hitting alpha damage gun, but it's not a derp gun, so it's reliable. You've also got that just
vision range to be able to outspot opponents, so it's really nice. And I just think overall that this tank is fantastic. Obviously we have put some camouflage on the tank to boost up the concealment even further, and if we really did want to maximise the vision potential, then yes, we probably would swap out the advanced loader to be able to put on advanced optics, but it's really down to you at the end of the day. There are plenty of options that you can use with this tank, but that's just the one that I've gone with, and I guess it is entirely up to you. As far as the other statistics of the tank, yes, you can fire premium rounds, which are heat, but often you don't really need them. And yeah, I would say maybe whack in potentially a couple, maybe 10 rounds, but you really won't need them for the majority of situations. And so that's kind of where I would go with this tank. Obviously, if you're firing AP rounds, then that is what you'll predominantly want to be firing, because you don't need them. 262mm of penetration is more than enough to go through the tanks that you'll be coming up against in the M46A1, which is right here. Obviously you can see the armor profile of the tank, it is fairly weak, so yes, you'll just pen pretty much everything you come up against, even the higher tier tanks within the era, or the higher era tanks. So you'll come up against anything that is in era 1, because this is probably one of the first era 1 tank or premium tanks that you can actually purchase. I think there is the M48A5 pattern Rise, I'm not entirely sure, but I think that that is also a premium tank within the era 1. But essentially the highest tier ones you're coming up against is the Walker Bulldog and the pattern, but when you get up into those sort of tier matchups, then it really doesn't matter too much, because you'll pen them anyway. There aren't really any traditional heavy tanks, at least currently, within within the Cold War game mode. You will be seeing the introduction of the Chieftain coming very, very soon, and without further ado, I think it's time we actually show you what this tank can do in the game, because that is the key statistic of the vehicle, and showing whether or not the statistics live up to the expectation that you put out on such a tank like this. The first gameplay, of course, we have today is on Kasserine. This is a map that will probably be quite a good one for the tank itself, and so this is why I kind of like to show these replays, although not being probably the result we may want in the end. It really does showcase what the tank can do, even in a matchup where you feel a little bit on the wrong end of the stick, as so to say, but this tank really does show off its abilities in a matchup where you may not really be winning that much, and I'm sure these two gameplays that are coming up, or this one and the next one, will really showcase the DPM and the real underestimated thing that this tank is, and it really does put out a lot more damage than you'd expect for a tank that looks pretty weak in terms of being a chaffy up against some tanks like the Object 268, but it works so well. That 280 alpha damage that this tank kicks out within a very short amount of time, and this replay is without any equipment on the tank itself. I think we may just have advanced concealment on, because I didn't have enough silver, and one thing we neglected to talk about is the silver earning potential of the tank itself. You can earn an absolute butt ton worth of credits with this tank. It is one of those that you really will enjoy actually just playing, and whilst you're playing you'll be making a ton of credits. It is like playing a premium tank like the Ragnarok, and if you have a game where maybe you do 4,000 damage, which isn't too hard in a tank that kicks out 280 damage per shot every 4 or 5 seconds, it really becomes very easy. And you'll see that within both these replays, that in short periods of time we're racking up thousands of damage very quickly, and that is where I really do enjoy this tank. It feels like a traditional, like, sneaky kind of tank where you have to be opportunistic, where you're getting your damage, and that's why I love this tank so much, and I'm sure many of you will as well. If you manage to get to a season rank 100, or if you just purchase the tank from the premium tank shop, I'm sure many of you will actually just do that, because I see a lot of you don't have the time to necessarily spend actually grinding through. But would I say it's worth the full price value of the tank, where you're probably paying like 12,000 gold? Probably not, but if you are interested in a tank that is going to give you a lot of fun, that has a bit of a novelty playstyle within the Cold War era, then this is definitely one of those, and that's where I've really enjoyed it that much. I think the problem occurs with the tank is when you're on that team and you just don't have that alpha damage to really shut down a lot of the opponents very, very quickly. Yes, you can have good games. Yes, you can deal a lot of damage within a short period of time, but because you just don't have the alpha damage, it really doesn't deter anyone from just coming after you. And that's the real problems that this tank faces. However, that's not necessarily that much of a problem because it only really affects you in the games where you are bottom tier, maybe when you are coming up against the high alpha TDs, or maybe if you are just coming up against people in a losing game itself. So you see that we haven't had particularly the most amazing start to the game. Yes, we have picked up nearly 1800 hit points worth of damage without taking a single shot, and I guess that's where the NM116 comes in quite nicely. We've barely been detected, only once, and we've managed to get away very easily as well because of that top speed limit that the tank has. Now, I'm not saying that this tank is definitely going to be a overpowered one, that everyone's just going to be able to just YOLO in and you're going to be able to just deal tons of damage without taking any, but it is one of those that you'll probably enjoy playing nonetheless. We know that there's someone over there by the rocks, but we're not going to poke it anymore because we've taken 2 hits and they're just spamming heat rounds. Anyway, 2,700 damage racked up so quickly within this game, and we're going to try and get some more out on that SU-122-44 that's over there, who's thinking that he's good sat behind that rock. Now, in the meantime, obviously we can use the accuracy of the tank to be pumping out damage into weak points of a lot of these tanks that maybe don't realise that we can get shots on them. The M48 there, taking loads and loads of hits into him as we just deal tons of damage so quickly. And you can see that with a 5-second reload to be able to do 280 damage per shell, it does not take long for you to just be overwhelming the opponents that you'll be coming up against. We make quite a bit of a misplay, and you'll see here that actually the top speed makes the tank very nice to try and escape, or at least avoid getting hit. But the problem with it is that the chassis rotation speed, all of the characteristics of the tank regarding that sort of aspect where you have to turn, you have to move, be agile, it really doesn't stack up. It's not anything like a light tank in that regard, and certainly not like any of the armadillos. You're not going to be able to just get yourself out of situations where, you know, you've got all of that kind of thing going on. It really does take quite a bit of skill, or at least quite a bit of manoeuvring and making sure that you are focusing in the right area to be able to do that. Obviously you can see right there we're trying to turn, but it takes so long for us to be able to do that. It becomes very tedious in points, and so now it's time for us to go on the run. Obviously, being on the run in a tank that doesn't turn very fast is problematic to say the least. You can see a lot of rounds coming in. We've got an Object 268 which can take away the majority of our hit points in one consecutive swipe. And now what we've got to do is put in rounds into this M46 here, who's deciding he's going to come. Now we can two-shot this guy fairly reliably. And luckily, just to make sure that we do actually two-shot him, we managed to hit him and set him on fire. Now there's another M46, and you can see just how quickly we reload over this guy. We can put nearly 2 shots in for every single time that he reloads. And of course we're dealing a lot more damage than he's dealing to us. He's only slapping off 240 hit points worth of damage every single shot compared to our 280. Now, we do eventually get taken out of this game, and I can't complain too much because, you know, we made a bit of a misplay. We probably should have run away, but we could definitely have done with a little bit more support from our teammates, who decided that apparently camping at the back of the map, actually travelling backwards from the cap circle, is a good option. Yeah, definitely don't be like those guys, although we do actually manage to pick up the win from the Object 268, so I can't berate him too much, but he really should be progressing further forward on the map, you know, reversing from the cap circle, using the true vision mechanic to potentially get some damage, considering he's only done, what, 262 for the T44A and only dealing 1,600 damage in the 268. It does feel very painful to watch, and although we do manage to pick up the win, as we'll skip forward right now, then yeah, I think that it's one of those scenarios where thank you for getting us the win, but you really could have helped out earlier in the game to potentially get us the win before. But you can see right here that he does manage to pick up the final guy in the cap circle, manages to pick up the win, and so we can't complain too much. Of course, we did manage to actually pick up a lot of damage that game, 5,000 damage. We also got the victory. We came second place, 5,081 damage to 1,293 XP, 2 kills. It's a nice result, I guess, for a game where I thought we were going to lose at the end. 170,000 silver earned that battle. Obviously, we made quite a bit of XP as well because we have got the double for our first win of the day. We've also picked up the premium tank bonus, giving us that extra silver because I think that this tank actually makes 55% extra silver over any other tank within the game mode that isn't a premium tank. So it's absolutely fantastic. We'll get into the second gameplay now where we show off an even better game. Whether or not we win or not, it's kind of down to you to watch to the end of the video. Right, so the second game is here on Desfall, or Dreadfall as I like to call it. It is a map that I do enjoy on the odd occasion, but I feel like it does get a little bit stale at points because it becomes a little bit more of a camp fest as you move throughout the map. And as the game develops, you often end up with this kind of situation where a lot of the time you're not really moving that much within the map, and if you do move, you're going into a lot of other camping opposition, which obviously isn't a great idea when you're playing on the True Vision map. So yeah, it's one of those that is huge, but you only really use a small proportion of the map, being the central point there over to our left where the city is, and these kind of hill areas on the southern flank, especially on this matchup, and obviously on the northern flank. The majority of the fighting often happens in the C3 area, where you see a lot of the opponents now getting spotted on the enemy team, and often a lot of the opponents will go to K9, but obviously you have to wait and see as to whether anyone actually goes there this game. What you'll notice with this tank, however, is the ability to be able to really put out the damage onto tanks that are advancing, because obviously if you miss a shot it becomes really important in something like an Object 268, which has the higher alpha damage, or in maybe a medium tank that tries to get out that damage at 320 like the T44A, where you have to make every single shot count, otherwise you won't be able to get your second shot in, or maybe you won't be able to deal enough damage back to the opponent that's just hit you to make the trade worth it, whereas this tank can really dish out that damage very, very quickly. And what you see us trying to do here is just catch that M48 out. Luckily, what we do manage to do is get a damaging shot on him, and he makes the awful mistake of coming back out. Whether or not he'll try and do that, whether or not, oh yes he does. What a shame for him. We're now going to just try and aim for the lower bit, and we do actually manage to re-damage him, and you'll see us actually just picking up damage, and this is where the DPM of the tank just under 5 seconds without having the combat rations on, which would reduce it even further to about 4.6 second reload. Yeah, it really does become so fun dishing out the damage in this tank, and it definitely feels very clunky to play, but it's one of those fun kind of clunky tanks that you can play in such a game mode. Now, this game really does get much better as we move and progress through the end of the game. I think that the key thing about this tank is trying to avoid getting or taking any shots early on in the game. Yes, you could say that about every single tank in the game. If you don't take any shots at the beginning, you'll be fine and you'll do better in the end of the game. Well, yeah, that's kind of common knowledge, but this really does take advantage from having the hit points to trade at the end, because what you can do then is put out the DPM onto tanks that are very slow, the heavier tanks within the game, maybe tanks that don't have good view range. You can use your hit points at that point to be able to try and get some extra damage. What you'll see me trying to do is just hitting blind. Obviously the shell speed is fairly okay in this tank, so you don't have to give too much of a lead, and you'll notice that with a lot of the Cold War tanks. Now what you do see there is of course the M41 Walker Bulldog, and he becomes a little bit of a key player on the enemy team in a later period of the game, whereby he becomes a little bit of a nuisance, a little bit of a pest to our hit point pool later on. But As far as the game's going right now, obviously we have the M46. We know that the Bulldog's up there, so he's going to be able to get some damage on us. And you can see rounds coming in onto our medium tank over there. Obviously we spot him there for a little second, a brief period of time where you have to stay aware. And this is where I kind of like the Cold War game mode, because if you are aware, if you look in through your scope all of the time or constantly, you can get damage onto tanks that maybe wouldn't have been able to get spotted. I suppose that is where a lot of people enjoy this kind of game mode. We put one round into the M46 there. Unfortunately we did kind of block that guy, but it wasn't intentional and I was just trying to get a shot back onto him. So I apologise if it was you and you're watching this video, unlikely as that is, but yeah, I am sorry. As far as what we've got to do now, we have to kind of make a play to be able to get rid of that light tank, because he is going to be the one that is kind of pestering us. And you see that the first shot has already come in. He's gone for the second one, which he's taken a little bit more of our hit points, and this is where I start to get a little bit angry, or at least a little bit annoyed through gritted teeth, where you really do want to avoid getting hit anymore, because you know he's the one that's going to be annoying to you, and it's just time to be able to get him out of the game. What you see me doing here is, of course, just trying to feather a shot into him wherever he may be. We're just waiting and waiting and waiting for him to make the mistake and maybe push up a little bit too much. Maybe he makes a mistake. Obviously, we've got to be a little bit wary as to what we're doing. We don't want to get hit unnecessarily, and we want to preserve that hit points like we talked about earlier. 2000 damage is probably a pretty mediocre game in the NM116. You'd probably be looking at about 3000 damage for an average game, and then of course if you're really pushing into the better kind of areas, you're probably upwards of 4.5k. Remember that these are kind of like tier... It's kind of difficult to judge them as to the World War II tanks, because obviously it's a separate game mode, but you're probably looking in the region of somewhere like a tier 8 maybe for this kind of tank itself, because of course when you compare it to something that's already in the game, it's like playing an M42 Chaffee but with a bigger gun, and when you're comparing it to the other tanks in this game, which are of course higher kind of tier tanks, then you're looking at the M48 Patton, which is a tier 10, so it's in between both of them, maybe a tier 9, and so you're probably looking at a 4.5k damage game. Is not a bad one, but this game is something else. It really does showcase how the tank can perform. Obviously you saw right there that we spotted the M41 A1 Bulldog and we take him out of the game, which is a very nice and satisfying thing. Obviously we got a little bit of lag as well, which was a little bit painful, but yeah, now we've just got to wait. We've got to wait for the opponents to make the mistake, and hopefully we can get a few more shots into them. We go for the damaging shot on the M48, we don't actually manage to do it. Now we're just kind of waiting to see where everyone will be and avoid getting hit any more than we have to be able to get that win or the victory or whatever you want to call it. 2,254 damage now, make that actually 2,500 damage. And you can see just how quick and how rapid this tank is to just push out that damage. It really does make it so worthwhile when you get someone out in the open, or you catch them out, or you detrack them, because I don't think people realise, because obviously this is a fairly new tank, there aren't very many people that have managed to get to tier 100 already, making it a nice tank, something a little bit different for you to actually play within Cold War. Now, we're in a bit of a sticky situation here. We've got tanks advancing from the left, we don't know who's over to our right. We've got to be very careful with where our hit points are getting traded and where we're going to lose our hit points, at least in the majority of situations. Obviously we try and lead a shot on the M46 there, but it goes slightly wide and we don't manage to get a decent shot on him. The T-44 here, don't quite know what he's doing, but I think he was obviously triggered at me for some reason, literally doing absolutely nothing wrong. Maybe he felt like I stole his kill on the tank previous, not entirely sure, but he really does actually try and screw me over in this game, and shame on him, to be honest with you. I'm just trying to help out a teammate down here. We're trying to aim at this guy, and then of course when we're fully aiming on him, the T-44 tries to push us off. I think that we'll give him the benefit of the doubt. Maybe he was just being silly, but of course he does get taken out of the game, and so yeah, it really would have been nice to actually take him out. Unfortunately that doesn't happen, and we are going to have to try and run away or at least avoid getting any more damage. We realise that our teammate here is the medium tank and he's on full health, so we aren't just going to completely run away. We're going to try and get up on top of the area to our right if we possibly can, after we try and take out this medium tank that's in front of us, obviously getting a little bit of lag, which is unfortunate. We hope that the T-44 there pushes up forward, but he doesn't. Don't think he realised we were actually there until it was way too late, and we take him out of the game. Now, certainly getting into a bit of a better game and a bit more of a tense situation, that's for sure, within this matchup. Of course, 3,700 damage. We've dealt a little bit of assistance damage, but it's nothing too special, especially considering we have fairly decent view range, so I would be expecting that in some games you are able to get a lot more damage. We make a little bit of a misplay here. We should have really gone for the M48 straight away to begin with, but never mind, 4 seconds later and we're pumping M full at the end of the game. Unbeknownst to me, in just a second, we're about to get a surprise from the rear, a nice sausage sandwich, as I like to call it, and unfortunately we get hit from the right as well. We lose one of our commanders, and then just as luck dawns, we have an Object 268 who's decided that he's going to come and try and take us. We do have enough hit points to take at least one shot from him, but luckily for him, he manages to take out our driver, which is actually so annoying, especially in a tank that is very slow. And yes, you could say that we could have had a premium medkit, but when you really think of it, a premium medkit wouldn't have helped because we had to take our commander back in, and unfortunately we do get taken out by the T-44A, but you can see just how much damage we dealt to a lot of opponents right there, especially considering they were all on full health, and we managed to help our team out a little bit. Unfortunately, we don't manage to win this game. 6,000 damage is certainly a decent roll of the dice, at least it was the highest damage within the entire game. We'll skip to the end scene because this T-54 on our team somehow gets away with running rings around the opponents for about 10 or 15 seconds. I don't know how that manages to happen, but yeah, the enemy team still managed to win that. 6,100 damage for us. We come top of the team, 5 kills, 293 assistance, meaning that we did actually have the highest damage, or at least base damage, within the game, coming second on total combined damage to the M41, who was that pest at the beginning of the game. So shout out to you for just being a nuisance throughout that game. Of course, we managed to pick up 177,000 silver as well, meaning that the tank definitely does earn silver. Would I recommend this tank? 100%. It is worth it if you do get to season rank 100. Of course, it's free. You don't have to pay anything for the tank unless you purchase it right now. Fantastic tank. Really do appreciate being able to test this tank out and see how well it plays, and it is a really great tank at the end of the day. So, of course, let me know your opinions on the tank. Do you think it's worse? Do you have a difference in opinion? Do you think it's a terrible tank and no one should play this tank? No one should grind to season rank 100? Or do you agree and you think it is a fantastic tank that can be played very well? Not overpowered, I would never say that, but it is definitely underestimated within the current meta. I just don't think people realise how good this tank is. Thank you very much for watching. Of course, if you want to check out other Season Pass tanks that are within this current season, you can check out the videos on screen, and of course just check back throughout the video contents history on my channel down below. Other than that, I hope you have a great rest of your weekend, and I hope you have a great rest of your week next week. Thank you. Goodbye.